I don't know what to make of this, folks. I really don't. I just don't know where to start from with the election situation in Cameroon. The provisional election results are out, ladies and gentlemen, and the outcome is the same as it was in 2018. The provisional election results indicate that Paul Biya is leading with 53% of the votes cast, even though the outcome still requires validation by the Constitutional Council of Cameroon. The gap between Paul Biya and Issa Chiroma al-Bakari is just too wide, ladies and gentlemen. 53% for Paul Biya and 35% for Bakari. And the problem with it is this. This is a country where you only need the majority votes to win. It is a single round with no room for runoffs, which means the candidate who gets the majority votes wins, which also means even if Paul Biya gets less than 50% of the votes, but it's still higher than the second candidate's percentage, he will still be declared as the winner. So, in spite of the closed gap from 2018 elections, the winner is most likely going to be the same person, the old man, ladies and gentlemen. Paul Biya will most likely be sworn in again for another term in office, making it his 8th term altogether. And he will be serving for another 7 years as president of Cameroon. How do you even process this, ladies and gentlemen? He will be the first president to stay in office into his 100th birthday. That's ridiculous. The whole thing is just bogus, ladies and gentlemen. And what shocks me the most is the vast majority of people in Cameroon will not change their minds no matter the economic condition Cameroon finds itself, so long as Paul Biya and his cronies are in charge. People actually went out and voted for a 93-year-old man who has already served 43 years in office and haven't brought about any significant changes, ladies and gentlemen. People still went out and voted for him. Can you believe this? I'm still struggling to understand how he managed to pull 53% of the votes. Wow. This is mind-numbing, ladies and gentlemen. I thought the Cameroonian people wanted something new for themselves. I really did. But I guess I miscalculated. This is not what I expected, I'll be honest. And it appears many of the youth in Cameroon aren't in agreement with the situation. And hence, the streets of Yaoundé, the capital, has already seen demonstrations happening. Cameroon's security forces just yesterday had to fire tear gas into a teeming crowd to disperse the opposition party supporters from protesting in the capital. Sporadic protests erupted nationwide from yesterday when people began seeing unverified tallies circulating on social media suggesting Paul Biya's re-election. These demonstrations were in towns like Garoua, Bafouassam, Dishan, Kozeri, and Douala, and more than 20 people have already been arrested. Ladies and gentlemen, at what point is enough enough? Several irregularities have been reported by civil society and observers, and it appears nothing will be done about it. Some of these irregularities included outdated voter rolls, police station relocations, ladies and gentlemen, issues of ballot distribution, and alleged ballot stuffing. Take a look at a picture like this, ladies and gentlemen. How do you want people to be confident in an electoral process when there isn't any transparency to it at the point of casting one's vote? Just observe this image carefully and see how the voter's back cannot be seen. And tell me how you can verify as to whether he's stuffing other ballot papers into one or not. And this was the system used across the country, ladies and gentlemen. Meanwhile, in every free and fair election anywhere in the world, the back of the voter usually faces the crowd or the queue, and the voter have the ballot box in front of him. That allows for everyone to see a person's actions inside the ballot box. There are so many things that went wrong with the Cameroonian election setup. It is like it was all set up for the old man to win, similar to how elections are set up in other African countries where the president has been in office since forever. All the same, the country is awaiting the official results from the Constitutional Council, which has until 26th of October to make a final proclamation. Between now and then, ladies and gentlemen, I know there's going to be a lot of agitations here and there, and in fact, it is expected. There are people who have already crossed borders into neighboring countries for safety, ladies and gentlemen, in Cameroon. There are speculations of a nationwide protest should the Constitutional Council declare Paul Biya winner again, and it's happened on social media. Paul Biya on 1st October returned to Cameroon to vote after living in Europe for a while. And if you haven't seen it, ladies and gentlemen, let me bring you this video. This was the video of when he came to cast his ballot. I mean, if you watch this video objectively, you will just know from conventional observation that this man is tired. Just take a look at the video. There is nothing in the tank of this man to offer. Yet, you see people paraded and cheering him on. This is how bad the situation is, ladies and gentlemen. People's commitment and allegiance is not to the state, but to leadership. They see no wrong and hear no wrong. All they see and know is the man through whom they are able to get whatsoever they want from the state. See how his military heads are cheering alongside his wife. I'm tempted to believe at this point that it may not be by his will to even run in these elections. I'm tempted to believe that his situation is like Joe Biden's situation, where he wants to leave the stage, but the system he's created around him doesn't, and I stand corrected. They are simply satisfied seeing him in the helm of affairs, because that's how they are able to take from the state as and when they want, ladies and gentlemen. That's what corruption does to people. It takes over the mind and one's ability to see any wrong. When people become so corrupt for so long, they forget how to live on their paychecks, ladies and gentlemen. They forget what it means to live within their means or live based off on their salaries. They cannot afford to lose the inflow of corrupt monies, ladies and gentlemen. I see the entire system in Cameroon so corrupt, they will not allow for anyone to come in and make any sort of changes to their corrupt arrangements. In a case like this, ladies and gentlemen, how does the future of this country look for people who are far from the ruling class? A great-grandfather who is supposed to be at home, being taken care of, is the one taking care of nearly 30 million people, with nearly 65% of them in their youthful stage. Ladies and gentlemen, how does that make sense? How does this work, ladies and gentlemen? How long can one be drunk on political power? What is there for him to do that he couldn't do in the last 43 years? What is there for them to steal that they haven't taken in the last 43 years, ladies and gentlemen? Nothing. Obviously, what they fear is a situation of accountability. After being corrupt for so long, you fear for when you have to be audited. That is their fear. You fear especially when the people doing the auditing aren't the usual people. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to sound defeated, but I have to bring you to speed with what is happening currently in the elections in Cameroon. But I know between now and the 26th of this month, strange things will be effected in the country. Strange things are going to happen. The world is changing Cameroon. Old things are passing away. New things are taking place. Old men have no clue what's happening. They live in a bubble where they depend on their aides for information and suggestions. Ladies and gentlemen, they are mostly ill-informed or misinformed. There is no room available for a 93-year-old man to lead in any part of Africa in 2025. They sit home and advise. They have served their purpose, and we have to let them go and rest, ladies and gentlemen. The time for change is today. Let no one deceive you. If it doesn't happen today, when else? And how many lives will be messed up in that process. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what to do with this news, but like I said, I needed to bring you up to speed. I'll see you in the next one. I'm Cyrus, and this is Tuntum Network in Accra, Ghana. Be sure to subscribe and click on the notification bell for more of my videos. Bye-bye for now.